Okay, hot. Good morning. I'm Ted Rall, and that over there is my guest co-host for today, Scott Stantis, filling in for Manila Chan.
Sorry.
Manila Chan is out, presumably with strep throat. We're going to get a formal diagnosis in a little bit, but
so she says.
That's the working theory. That's we apparently she already tested for COVID. I don't know if she has one of my ancient test kits that might back from the troubled days of 2022.
How many of those kits do you actually own, Ted? Because
I probably have like 8 of them.
Oh, I'm surprised it's only 8.
At one point, well, I've used quite a few of them, and I went to the store back when you had to buy them for like $20 each, and I kind of hoarded. There was kind of a hoarding thing going on in the COVID days, so I bought like maybe 5, and then the government was giving them away by mail, and so I signed up every time. I don't know. I probably use that. I got to say what I've discovered is, by the way, that my right nostril is a lot ticklier than my left.
I don't even know what to do with that. What
exactly? It's my weakness.
It's your Achilles nostril.
It's my Achilles nostril. Yeah, and my right nostril also runs more than my left nostril, and it bleeds more. It's like my Achilles nostril. It's true. I probably should donate it to science and just do without it.
That is so weird. It's your right nostril.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Now, we have talked about, because Ted and I are both a French extraction, and what's weird is that my right nostril is significantly smaller than my left. It's
really?
Wow. So yeah, somewhere there was some Gaulish guy walking around with one small nostril.
Well, I know that my nose has been broken in fights at least twice. So
really,
and now the good thing is that the second time it was broken from the opposite direction. I think it was a lefty who punched me in the face. So that was kind of like 2 wrongs make a right, sort of.
Oh God. Okay.
Anyway, this was for those who have ideas. That was a long time ago. I'm 61. You're not allowed to do that now.
Yeah, you can break a hip.
All right, let me intro the show, and then we'll do the headlines. All right, so this is the TED Manila Information Show, TMI for short, where we bring you way too much information. Anything from news, politics, lifestyle, culture, nature, fad diets, what the kids are up to, what the kids are not up to, the taboo, the occult. Anything and everything goes, because we believe you can never have too much information. Today, after the headlines, we'll be talking about fascism. Fascism is in the news. What is fascism? And is Donald Trump a fascist? If you are looking for a straight-laced, button-down news program, this show is not for you. Tune away, and never come back. Well, come back in like a minute. It's stuff you need, you will want to. It's stuff you know you want to hear about. Maybe stuff you never knew you wanted to know. And we're gonna have a few laughs along the way. We are live every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern time. So. Wow. Sure, that's American time, patriotic time. So be sure to like and follow this show. The TED Manila Information Show starts now. The thing again twice, because I kind of complained about that. So Manila's, by the way, is behind the yellow curtain. She is running the show, but she can't speak because of whatever is going on with her throat. Obviously, that makes talk radio a problem. So, Scott, let's get into the headlines.
Instead of grunt radio.
We're going to or yeah, I guess there's whisper radio. Like, hello, Ted, how are you?
Yeah, that's a different show altogether.
Indeed. All right, let's get into it. Speaking of fascism, maybe, sort of, allegedly, former President Donald Trump rally at New York City's Madison Square Garden last night came across more like the revenge tour of his dreams, featuring speeches laden with untruths, racist, sexist, and vulgar remarks, and a dark vision for his second term, should he be elected on Tuesday. It had everything, a week from Tuesday, I should say. It had everything one might expect from a MAGA rally. Tech billionaire Elon Musk jumped up and down on stage again. Wrestler Hulk Hogan ripped off his shirt again.
I know. Did you hear what he said? This was so great. He says, "I don't see any Nazis here, just real Americans." Wow.
That's not really a contradiction, unfortunately, as we will discuss a little bit. So
it was bad.
Wrestler Hulk Hogan ripped off his shirt again. An artist who painted a picture of Trump hugging the Empire State Building. Disgraced former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani announcing that he was not going to trade in conspiracy theories before launching right into one. Conservative commentator Tucker Carlson calling himself a slave who was liberated by Trump. And a rare appearance from former First Lady Melania Trump. Speakers called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. Said that Vice President Kamala Harris is the devil and the Antichrist, who had begun her career as a prostitute, and repeatedly accused Democrats of trying to kill Trump. They told Trump supporters to slaughter Democrats. At one point, the crowd chanted "Tampon Tim" to disparage Tim Walz. So that happened.
Yeah, it was unseemly. It was pretty grotesque. It really was. And I mean, you're talking about someone who is conservative-ish. Was, but this was just, I mean, it was so unseemly, it was just uncomfortable to watch. And there's a lot of people out there who are angry. I was talking to a family member, and I mean, he's older, and my God, he didn't just drink the Kool-Aid, he drank the whole barrel. And he's not alone, clearly. And I mean, I don't want this to be like an anti-Trump squeed, but this rally was just, there are comparisons, and I guess we'll touch on those a little later. But
yeah, we will.
It was on. And how could you? I mean, first of all, 4 hours. I don't want to do anything I enjoy for 4 hours, Ted, let alone sit and listen to the speakers. Any speakers. I mean, it could be Abe Lincoln followed by Teddy Roosevelt, followed by Franklin Roosevelt, and followed by JFK. I would just be like, I don't want to sit there for that. It was just amazing. It was so long. And these things are gotten to be so long. They're very Castro-esque, aren't they?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. They are very Castro-esque. I basically felt like, I think this may have been overblown in terms of the political effect, and we can talk about that, in the fascism segment here. But I kind of feel like it's not likely that this is going to be really paid attention to by, the swing voters. I mean, this is not new information. This is Donald Trump playing up to his base and just trying to close the deal and, make sure that there's like the massive enthusiasm among those people. I think that's about it.
Why? I mean, is this New York City? This was New York ever seriously in line? I mean, a potential Trump victory there, because I can't see that. Although you travel upstate fairly frequently, and you see, and also Long Island, there is support for the former president there.
Oh no, there certainly is. There's just absolutely. Look, it's true. Upstate New York, they're out in the hinterlands. There is tons and tons of support for him. You see the flags everywhere, the signs, banners. And so, I mean, New York City is, of course, deep, deep blue. But I think Donald Trump is really intelligent, right? I mean, you have, well, maybe that may not be true, but he's a good campaigner. And, he understands he understands staging and theatricality. Look, I think his people even knew that the comparison was going to be made with the German Bund rally in 1939, because it was at the same exact site. Although actually it wasn't actually physically exactly at the same site. Madison Square Garden is no longer where Madison Square Garden was back then. Madison Square Garden moved sort of about 15 blocks. The reason it's called Madison Square because the original one used to be Madison Avenue. This one's not. It's quite a ways from Madison Avenue, but it kept the name. And but I think that he knew this would be talked about and discussed, and he's the ultimate believer in there's no such thing as bad publicity. So this is just like it was going to be. He knew it was going to make a splash. I think the offensiveness of the comedians and the comments about Puerto Rico and so on, that's a feature, not a bug for him. I mean, the worst would be, he had a temperate rally. People showed up. They seemed enthusiastic for him. The end. Next story. That's not what he wants.
Well, it just seems like the vulgarity flies in the face of, and this is, I'm going to show my oldness and my old conservativeness. It just flies in the face of what that old line conservatism was, which was polite, which was believed in manners, old school manners. And so the vulgarity is shocking still to me. And again, this is, I will readily admit that this is an old guy, saying this, but it was just strange. I mean, the comedian, the comedian thing is getting all the play on NPR this morning, all that stuff. And I mean, it's a comedian. Who cares? But it wasn't just the comedian. It was the other speakers, the guy brandishing the cross, saying that Kamala Harris is the Antichrist. It's so funny when you hear these guys, just about everybody's the Antichrist. Maybe it's one of those things they hope that eventually they'll be right. But even when they're right, it's going to suck. If you know anything about the book of Revelation, it's not going to be a good time. And I guarantee you those guys aren't going to be the ones who are going to be spirited up to heaven. I generally don't talk for God, but in this instance, I think I can say with some confidence.
Well, because there's definitely, like, you remember when some people thought that Ronald Wilson Reagan 666 in the name was the Antichrist, and now I was kind of like trying to put that together. Like, well, Kamala's got 6, Donald's got 6, but Trump is 5, Harris has got 6, but the middle name doesn't work for either of them.
Well, it's preposterous. I guarantee you, if you read the Bible, if you believe, and I do, that this isn't going to be a surprise. It's not going to be, I'm the devil. Oh, God, who knew? It's not going to happen that way.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting point. We think of the devil as being sneaky, but, like jumping out of a box. But all right, let's move on.
Okay.
Of fascism. Okay, so J.D. Vance, the Republican vice presidential nominee, said yesterday that he agreed with Trump that some of his Democratic opponents pose a bigger threat to the U.S. than foreign adversaries. Quote, what he said, and I do agree with this, what he said is that the biggest threat we have in our country, it's not a foreign adversary because we can handle these guys, he said. I'm not so sure. The Iraqis kind of kicked our butts and the Afghans kicked our butts, but okay.
And the Vietnamese and the,
in the Vietnamese, that too. We can handle foreign conflicts. We can't handle. Look, under Nancy Pelosi's long life in public leadership, the U.S. has gone from the preeminent industrial power of the world to second next to China. That fundamentally belongs on Nancy Pelosi's shoulders. Is deindustrialization Nancy Pelosi's fault?
Well, I would say if he's looking at NAFTA, which seems to be. Now they oppose it now. They're talking about tariffs on everything. A 20% tariff on virtually everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the other point that he made, which is wrong, is that we're not second to China. Still, we're still by far and away the biggest economy on the planet by a lot.
But not industrial, right? We're moving more into the knowledge economy.
Yeah, yes, and that's what they're hoping that the tariffs will do. The tariffs will not, by the way. That's just not going to happen. So to say that the internals, yes, you can have internal debates, but to say that they're worse than being invaded, that's absurd. But they're ratchet. This happens every time in every election, Ted, from time memoriam, well before the United States was a country. Politics and fighting for power has always devolved in the latter parts into hyperbole and into hysteria. And that's what this was. We're just going further and further into those waters, listening to the Democrats. They're doing the same thing.
Vance was pressed on the threats that Trump has been making to political adversaries. Those threats include describing his opponents as an enemy from within, vowing to imprison people he deems to have cheated in elections, as he accused Democrats and election officials of doing in 2020, and reposting calls on social media for specific Democrats and anti-Trump Republicans to be jailed or subjected to military tribunals. Jake Tapper asked, "None of that sounds fascistic to you at all?" "No, of course it doesn't," Vance replied.
Oh, God.
Denying that Trump had made some of the threats in question and saying that in other cases, his words had been twisted out of context.
There are instances when they say, like, he said Trump says he's going to be a fascist. He said, I'm going to be a dictator on day one. And if you listen to the whole quote, they really do have a point when they say he was addressing the border and other issues that he was going to pass executive orders on day one. Okay. That's taken out of context, but some of the other stuff, if you mount it on one on top of the other, it's hard to say, that's just Trump being Trump. At what point does that stop? And at what point does it become reality and become a threat? JD Vance is the kind of guy, whatever it takes, he's going to say. He's a lawyer in that sense of he loves to debate. You and I love to debate. We're not lawyers, but we love to debate. And it's fun to take any side you can. But he's handed this weird side and he'll debate it. He'll argue it. It's really interesting. He's a smart guy. Of the four running, he's the only smart one, quite frankly.
No, that is true. All right. Japanese elections are normally steady and boring, but this election was not either one. It was the perfect storm. A scandal that saw dozens of Democratic Party lawmakers investigated over pocketing millions of dollars in proceeds from political fundraisers. Meanwhile, Japanese households are struggling with inflation, high prices, stagnant wages, and a sluggish economy. In the end, a furious electorate sent a strong message in the vote yesterday, punishing the LDP at the ballot box, and it was stunning. A party which had ruled Japan continuously since 1955 lost. Although severely bruised, the LDP still won more seats, 191, than the biggest opposition party, the Constitutional Democrats, whose final tally is at 148. This election appears to be about voters who are fed up with a party and politicians they see as corrupt and dirty. But it's not one where they want to bring about a new leader, said Jeffrey Hall, a lecturer at Kanda University of International Affairs. And yet the old leadership's fate is unclear. The LDP's governing coalition has fallen short of the halfway mark, 233 out of 465 in the Diet, that's the parliament there, after its ally Komeito lost several seats, including that of its own chief. Even with Komeito's 24 seats, the LDP still can't muster a majority. Scott, I used to work for a Japanese bank between 1986 and 1990, and I remember there were parliamentary elections at that time. And I don't really know at the time, it was already a long time that the LDP had been in power. And it was like, at some point, someone will kick their ass. And no one ever did. And I remember, parenthetically, my boss, this is when I really got to know him and understand who he was and like him. And we got really close. He came in and I was like, how did you vote? He goes, "I'm very disappointed by the results, which the LDP had just won." I said, oh, really? How come? Who did you vote for? And he goes, "I vote straight communist in every election." And I thought that was fascinating for, a Japanese bank executive to say. It was like, he's like, "Of course." And I'm like, "But you're a banker." And he goes, "When you're a banker, that will turn you into a communist because you see how the sausage is made."
Well, it certainly turns you into one. I have to admit, I'll defer to you. What happens next in Japan?
Well, they're going to have to, this is like, they have a standard parliamentary system, which means that there's nothing, they can't form they can't ask the president to form a government unless they have a coalition that can govern. So they're going to reach out to the LDP and the Constitutional Democrats will reach out to the other smaller parties and see if they can get up to that halfway mark. If they can, they go to the president and say, "Hi, we're ready to form a government. We'd like to appoint a prime minister," and that will be that. Okay. That'll happen, I'm sure. Okay, so let's go into headline numero cuatro. Many studies have found that I know you've been hanging on tenterhooks over this story, Scott. Many studies have found that American women report craving chocolate around menstruation, often with an increase beginning a few days before its onset. There's a popular idea that chocolate cravings are linked to fluctuating hormones during the menstrual cycle, but the data hasn't been clear. Now researchers believe that cravings around menses are culturally driven, not biological. American women actually tend to crave chocolate far more than in other countries. A 2006 survey of 300 Cornell students found that 91% of female students surveyed craved chocolate. For women, chocolate was also the most craved food overall. But in other parts of the world, chocolate cravings are less common. The same 2006 study surveyed Spanish college students and found that of about 260 students at a university in Spain, 28% liked chocolate, but that was compared to 49% for American women. In addition, another study in 2019 found that the most craved food among Japanese women was, wait for it, rice. Because who hasn't woken up with a major rice craving? And only 19% of Japanese women crave chocolate in general. Cravings are complex. They are not related to how hungry you are, and they can be driven by many factors, including habits we create around eating. Caloric intake for women does increase right before the start of the period. At the same time, insulin resistance may decrease. So fluctuating hormones does feel logical, and for a long time it was hypothesized that the fall in progesterone is what caused and induced chocolate cravings. However, when scientists directly measured hormone levels and tried to correlate them with cravings, there's no link was found. Another study found that oral progesterone treatment was no better than placebo in reducing chocolate or sweet cravings among menstruating women. Additionally, if chocolate cravings were truly tied to the menstrual cycle, you might expect that after menopause they would go away, or at least drop by the percent accounted for by premenopausal women who specifically reported cravings. Researchers from UPenn found that postmenopausal women did crave chocolate less than premenopausal women, but that difference was only by a small fraction, not enough to pin it on the period. Most postmenopausal women, 77%, still crave chocolate and link it to their mood. These studies have led scientists to now believe that eating chocolate is really just a culturally sanctioned and conditioned response to stress, especially in the United States. And having a period every month is a stress.
I suspect so. Not being a woman, I can't address this directly. But it makes sense. You talked about insulin levels going down. I'm getting into the weeds here, but just insulin levels going down or going up would make sense to crave something sweet. Even in Japan, they crave carbohydrates with rice. I mean, it's just that would make some sense there.
Well, you've lost blood, right? Although it's a different kind of blood. So
yeah,
protein when you lose blood is, I mean, I get meat cravings if I lose a substantial amount of blood for some reason.
Well, getting punched in the face, apparently.
For example, head right over to the bar and get a big burger right away.
Just a big hunk of meat.
Fucker. Yeah.
Okay, I love this video though of just two anonymous women eating chocolate. This is just bizarre.
You know, it's funny about the chocolate. Do you have this thing like where, you know, like women, when you're around women, they're like, I mean, it's like an article of faith that every human like really thinks about chocolate a lot.
I don't.
I mean, I don't think about chocolate a lot. I mean, no. It's like if someone hands me a piece of chocolate, I'm happy to eat it, but I don't really care.
No, I don't crave it. My son, my oldest boy, craves it. He loves it. But neither my wife nor I really crave that stuff. Another example that you and I are somehow related.
And strange. And finally, the most important story of the day: any cat person will tell you that the most extraordinary honor a cat can bestow upon a human being is the slow blink. Receiving a slow blink from your own cat is always lovely, but getting a slow blink from another person's cat is magic. Conversely, slow blinking at your cat only to be met with the hard, cold stare of death is a cat lover's ego. But are we reading too much into it? Is a blink just a blink? Research backs up the idea that this is actual interspecies communication now. A study in Scientific Reports describes two experiments. The first showed that the cats did respond in kind when their humans slow blinked at them. In the second experiment, the humans were strangers and therefore potential food. The cats also blinked back at these humans and were likelier to move towards an outstretched hand if the human had slow blinked first. Professor Karen McCollum of the School of Psychology at the University of Sussex, who supervised the work, said, as someone who has both studied animal behavior and is a cat owner, it's great to be able to show that cats and humans can communicate. It's something that many cat owners already suspected, so it's exciting to have found evidence. This study is the first to experimentally investigate the role of slow blinking in cat-human communication, and it is something you can try yourself with your own cat at home or with cats you meet in the street. It's a great way of enhancing or the cat house. It's a great way of enhancing the bond you have with cats. Try narrowing your eyes at them as you would in a relaxed smile, followed by closing your eyes for a couple of seconds. You'll find that they respond in the same way themselves, and you can start a conversation. Scott, I worry that this is ultimately, we're going to look back years from now and be like, this was the beginning of when cats started to take over humanity. It's not AI, it's the cats who will rule us all.
Right. So, because they want us to close our eyes, even for just a few seconds. That's their dastardly plan. We both know it. So, have you slow blinked at Clovis, your cat? I mean,
absolutely. No question about it.
Absolutely.
And of course, I've slow.
Don't make it sound like this is a normal thing. I don't own a cat,
normal.
So.
Well, first of all, no one owns a cat. The cat owns you. But like, yeah, it's like they have the property rights. They have the deed. That's how it is. Of course. I mean, the thing is, look, cats, it's very subtle. And I'm sure dogs are more expressive. It's because they're stupider. But basically, they if you look at a cat carefully, day after day after day, they smile, they frown, they express emotions. They let you know what's up. Like today, this morning, Clovis woke up hungry as shit, and he let me know there was not going to be any peace in this house until breakfast was served.
Is that why you sent a text out? It's ungodly o'clock this morning.
Yeah. Well, I was just up. I was having trouble sleeping, but no, Clovis is a good cat. He doesn't awaken one too early, but it was just like kind of, I mean, the point is that cats definitely communicate. The slow blink is a real thing. So,
wow. Okay. Well, I'll have to give it a shot next time I see Clovis.
All right. Indeed. So, or any cat on the street that you meet.
Yes. Well, there's a cat on our walk, actually. Jean, who is this great tabby cat.
Oh, tabby? Gray tabby. Yeah. I love those.
Orange.
I mean, it's what's funny about, it's like, that's called an orange mackerel, the orange tabby, like like a Morris, the tabby cat.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Yeah. Those are I had a cat like that. Indy. He was a great cat. I miss him.
Oh, what was his name?
His name was Indy. I did not name him because obviously from Clovis, Rall cats have better names than that, but previous names include Brezhnev. Just saying.
Oh my God. Did the cat have huge eyebrows? Because that was awesome.
He was a he was a dictatorial cat, I will say. A bit of an apparatchik, but what can you say? Great cat though. All right, so let's talk about fascism. We promised, fascism has been in the news, right? I mean,
yes.
John Kelly, former chief of staff of Donald Trump, recently said to great public discussion that in his opinion, Donald Trump was a fascist. Obviously, this is not the first time that the F word has been lobbed in Donald Trump's direction at all. And there's been a lot of fascination as to whether he fits the formal criteria for this. Kamala Harris affirmed recently in an interview that she believed that Trump is a fascist and fits the formal definition. So, Scott, I had the guy who literally wrote the book on fascism as my thesis advisor, and wow. as a college student at Columbia University. So, Robert O. Paxton. He's now a retired professor from Columbia University. He wrote a number of books. He literally wrote the book on Vichy France, called Vichy France. That book was very influential. It's so important that it is the main book about Vichy studied in France. It's an English language book, but it's translated into French. So for a foreigner to write the book about French history on a subject, and of course Vichy France was France's fascism. And then he, after later after I had him. He wrote The Anatomy of Fascism, which is considered the most important work defining fascism in the 20th century. And it sort of walks you through what fascism is. And I thought it would be very useful to sort of, and I should also, to some bragging rights, Paxton always let me know that I was the only person ever to have received an A in his fascism seminar. It was a notoriously difficult class. The only assignment was your final paper. There were no tests. There was no midterm paper. There was one paper, and mine was about the prospects of fascism coming to the United States. And we were trying to choose which country would be most likely, this was in the early 90s, to become a fascist country. Many people at that time were sort of thinking about Russia, which was coming out of the Soviet period and was collapsing at that time. But he agreed with me that if fascism were to return in its classic Mussolini Hitlerian kind of way, it would be most likely in the United States. Famously, it's been observed that fascism, if it ever came to England, would come in would wear a bowler hat. And I said in my paper, I thought if it ever came to the United States, it would come in a baseball cap. It's like, obviously, we kind of seen that. Now, so the question is, now Paxton, after J6, was interviewed by the New York Times and asked if Trump, in his view, and he's been asked this a bunch of times, fit the traditional definition. He's a very cautious man. And he said that he doesn't think fascism is a helpful word in American politics because it's been used by left and right alike in order to smear anybody as sort of a generic insult for anybody whose politics they just don't like. But fascism does have a very specific early to mid 20th century meaning. I thought it would be important and useful for us today, Scott, to sort of go through how fascism developed and what it is. So it emerged out of the ashes of World War I, and people in the United States really sort of forget about Benito Mussolini, but Mussolini is really the guy who invented fascism, and the word fascism comes from these organizations called the fasci, which is basically a brotherhood. It's an Italian word, and it was the movement really took off in 1922. It was the far right. It was Italian veterans who felt that Italy had been stabbed in the back in World War I, should have won but lost. That the socialists were running wild. Don't forget, this was only 5 years after the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, and that really, everybody thought that Bolshevism was on the move, and fascism was a hardcore right-wing reaction to Bolshevism and socialism. Mussolini, of course, he ruled right until 1943 in Italy, from 1922 to 1943. Hitler was but a young pup, but he really admired Mussolini. And there have been obviously other iterations of fascism. There's Franco in Spain, who was considered a classic fascist. There was Oswald Mosley, the leader of the British Fascist Party. Of course, they never came to power in the UK. Marshal Pétain, many people do not really consider to be a classic fascist leader, although he did preside over a regime that had a lot of fascist aspects. Portugal, yeah.
People forget that was an even longer lasting fascist state than Spain, interestingly.
That's true, and there have been other iterations, like some people think Antonescu and then Ceausescu in Romania fit the mold of a classic fascist, although he also had aspects of a left-wing sort of style dictator, which is a different thing. Fascism is a politic of the far right. It's not a politic of the far left at all, even though some people on the right in the United States try to claim that it is. So I went back to a paper that Paxton wrote for Princeton back in 2016. And this is what he talks. And I wanted to sort of go through these definitions of what fascism looks like. Very important Paxton's not God, and he would be the first to say that, but he's gone further than anyone else at defining exactly what it is. And it's hard to put a finger on it because fascism is not really about policy. Fascism is about a method of organization and a certain tone and the way, and it's like the cult of action and dynamism is to the center of this. So let's go through the Paxton's 7 defining attributes. Number 1, the primacy of the group toward one has duties superior to every right, whether universal or individual. In other words, the group is more important. Group rights is more important than the individual rights. This is now, I think Trumpism is weak on this.
Yes, I would agree. It's more about individual rights, individual preferences, and individual feelings, quite frankly. It's much more, Trumpism is much more of an emotional theology, if you will, than it is the primacy of the group. Not so much.
Yeah, no, I think, obviously there are certain aspects like only I can fix it, right? Like something Trump says all the time.
Right.
But still, nobody's being asked, in German fascism, which is the most, Nazi Germany is basically viewed as the most extreme version, embodiment of fascism. And within Nazi Germany, historically, people look at the way that Nazism unfolded in what is today Poland, which the Germans called the general government, right? Basically, it was kind of a no man's land in terms, it was not, in Nazi Germany itself, there were still attributes of the German state that predated 1933 and Hitler's seizure of power. So, for example, there were still jurists and police and generals who belonged to the pre-Hitlerian period, and they stayed on. But in occupied Poland, the SS and the Nazis were given free rein to do whatever the fuck they felt like. And so, and that's why most of the death camps and the biggest death camps were placed there. And that's where Nazism really had its full bloom, and where you got to really see completely unvarnished, completely radical fascism at work. Italian fascism was always considered very watered down. The Italians are not the most organized people, really. And that even went to their fascism. One time, my mom's first trip she grew up in occupied France. She was born in 1935. France fell in 1940, so she was 5. Her first trip out of the country was to Italy. And I asked her as an adult, like, isn't that strange? Wasn't that weird? And she goes, why? And I was like, it was only 5 years after World War II. You went to Italy, which was fascist, and had, lackadaisically invaded the French Riviera, hilariously, only the French Riviera, and occupied it throughout World War II. And she's like, the Italians, they're like us. They just want their wine and their food. She's like, their hearts weren't really in it. And she's kind of right. And Hitler was always frustrated with Mussolini because he thought Mussolini was like a wank and like disorganized and not really a hardcore.
Well, he wasn't wrong. I mean,
yeah.
But Mussolini still believed in Mussolini being the head of the power was the ultimate goal, and he certainly achieved that.
And by the way, when I think of comparisons, I don't see many like good comparisons between Donald Trump and a certain Austrian corporal, but I do with Mussolini.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, the jutting jaw,
the machismo
himself. Yeah,
that whole thing. Yeah, there's very, very, very similar. Yeah, I'd have to say in terms of, it's not the maniacal, Austrian gesticulation, but Mussolini, as we're looking at the video now of him, I mean, it's shockingly similar.
Now, I also should say that in terms of what really tipped Paxton over to thinking that Trump might fit the bill was J6. And, and I've always been very skeptical. Frankly, I thought it was an insult to Hitler to compare Trump to him, because Hitler was a very organized guy.
Yeah, but the beer hall poosh was pretty lame, and
that's
was
true.
Extremely unsuccessful.
True. And but then I was reminded of an episode that I had forgotten about that I did study under Paxton, which was a riot in 1934. a French socialist president was elected and government. And the president was due to be sworn in. Does this sound familiar? They were going to codify the votes, as it were. And a group of right-wing veterans and proto-fascists called the Croix du Feu, which means the cross of fire, burst into the French parliament, trashed the joint. Does that sound familiar? And tried to prevent the swearing in of the new president. Didn't work. The military responded, and they were put down. But I mean, I can see the comparison with January 6th.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's a question: is Trump a fascist? I mean, because it's such a reach, and because it is such an extreme statement, you better be careful when you say it. I mean, I know that you and I have been political commentators for over 40 years. Mm-hmm. And, how often have we heard, Reagan's a fascist, Clinton's a fascist, Obama's a fascist, Bush is a fascist. I mean, it just, everybody was a fascist. And, if you listen to those people, we've been under fascism for a long, long, long time. Yeah. None of it was true. This is different. This smells different. It looks different. And I mean, if you keep going down the list, Ted, I wish you would. I think we're going to see more and more, because the primacy of the group, I don't think.
Not really. And also, I guess, I don't know if American fascism could ever have that, because American individualism,
right? Yeah.
So at the core of our body politic, from far left to far right. Right. I mean, what is this? This current campaign, for example, for Democrats, it's about abortion rights, right? About the primacy of a woman's control over her body. Let's move on. You're right. We have 6 more to get through. Number 2, the belief that one's group is a victim, a sentiment which justifies any action against the group's enemies, internal as well as external.
Well, yeah. Ding, 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 ding. We have a winner. If Trumpism is anything, it's victimhood, which always made me, suck it up, Buttercup, has always been when I hear them complain about this stuff. And like I said earlier, talking to a family member, it's like, he's an old white male. I'm going, what are you a victim of other than your own bad decisions? Mm. What are you a victim of? But apparently, Kamala forced him into those bad decisions over 70 years, apparently. But don't you agree? I mean, the victimhood is like...
Oh, I'm like, check. Yeah, no question about it. Especially this part about it justifies any action against the group's enemies. In the headlines, I talked about how I mentioned the fact that he's been calling for action against the enemy within. He doesn't define what that is. I think we're supposed to kind of guess what that is. And he said internal as well as external. Well, the enemy within is internal, right? So I don't see Trump really defining a lot of external enemies. I feel like outside of the United States, I feel like he's much more concerned about the prosecutors who are after him personally.
Yeah.
And of course, what he talks about, the socialists, the communists, the far left, that would be me.
Yeah. Ted wishes they were communists. They are not.
Oh God, no! I'd be out there instead of doing this show. I'd be out with my neighbors campaigning for Kamala right now, if that were the case. All right, number 3, dread of the group's decadence. The group, in other words, the American people's decadence under the corrosive effect of individualism and cosmopolitan liberalism.
Yes to the latter part, no to the former part.
Totally agree. Yeah, no, I mean, it's certainly, again, you can't really be anti-individualistic in the United States. That's just not going to work. But certainly cosmopolitan liberalism, well, what do we mean by that? Things like LGBT rights, paying, the ads that we've seen, complaining about Kamala Harris allegedly supporting the taxpayer money being used to pay for prisoners to transition, that kind of thing. That's cosmopolitan liberalism.
Yes.
Okay. Number 4. So that's a half. Closer integration of the community within a brotherhood, the fascio, whose unity and purity are forged by common conviction, if possible, or by exclusionary violence, if necessary.
Well, that would certainly tie into the mass deportations, wouldn't it? Yeah,
exclusionary violence, I think. I think that's right. But I think I think it's about the rallies. I mean, I think one of the things that Democrats miss a lot when they look at the rally, like at Madison Square Garden or any of these other Trump rallies, they see hatred and contempt. And I'm not saying those things aren't there, but I think those are coming from the stage. When you talk to, for example, my former co-host, Angie Wong, about like Trump rallies, she and many other people have told me that it's not like that at all. It's a very like happy feeling. There's tailgating. People are feeling a sense of common purpose. They're having fun. Like, it's obviously fun to put on your Trump gear and put on your Trump hat and go with, and it's like going to a rock concert, right? Where you're all there, you're all fans of the same thing, the same person. There's a sense of community in these rallies. I don't think you can understand MAGAism or Trumpism without understanding that.
I think that's an element of it. But do you remember the book, the King book, The Stand? And it's effectively, the world, there's an apocalypse and it breaks into two good and bad cultures, sides. Effectively, it doesn't really overtly state the devil and God, but that's clearly the homage at the very least.
Clearly. And
the people who infiltrate the bad side for the good side and go back, and they're there was no difference really. I said, where was the difference? Because they seemed to like each other. They joked. There was smiles and everything. The difference was that, and this is over the top, but of course it's a work of fiction, but they said the difference was love, that there was on the good side, there was love, on the bad side, there wasn't. And I'm looking at the Trump rallies. I'm seeing anger is the overriding and overarching emotion, coming back to the victimhood, coming back to what was that, number one or number two? Number two from the list of what makes a fascist. So that to me would be and I'm not saying Kamala is like a joy fest, because I don't think that's really rises to that level, quite frankly. And Walls is just like
although I mean, look, I don't think Harris. Look, Harris is not a fascist, obviously, and I don't even think she's close to it. I mean, however, those rallies definitely have a sense of common purpose. I mean, all rallies have a somewhat, fascistic vibe. I mean, if you ever saw, I'm sure you did, the animated Pink Floyd The Wall movie, that The Wall, and especially the movie, really strongly makes the case that like rock concerts are kind of, especially in big stadiums, are kind of inherently fascist. And it's all, and they I think there's something to it. I mean, like, look at, for the Democrats, right? What is the primary driving force of what we call it? Kamalaism was just voting Democratic, or the Democratic, or the Harris campaign. It's hatred of Donald Trump, right? Or fear of Donald Trump.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. You're right. There's no, so yeah, you asked the question several times during this campaign, where's the joy? Where's the, and we talked about historically who had joy in the 20th century, for instance, FDR, Teddy Roosevelt, JFK, Reagan, all those guys. There's a joyfulness about it. And that doesn't exist in this. I'm not sure that Kamala Harris has the ability to project that, quite frankly. And Tim Walz certainly doesn't.
He just goofiness is
what a weird. Okay, go on. We have two more to go. So
all right, two more to go. Actually, I think we have three more to go. An enhanced number 5 is an enhanced sense of identity and belonging, in which the culture of the group reinforces individual self-esteem.
Oh well, shit. Come on. You've got the MAGA hats. You've got this flags. I mean, that fits like a glove.
Yeah. Now, and I don't think, by the way, that Harris has had huge rallies. She's sold out stadiums. Her rallies absolutely compare in size to his.
Yes.
But I'm going to say there's no sense of grandeur at her rallies. They're just rallies.
That's another great word. You came up with a word during our podcast once, and it was brilliant to describe her. You called her untalented. And I thought, wow, that is exactly the right word to describe Kamala Harris as a politician.
Yeah.
That's true. And now, what word did you use to describe her rallies?
Well, so there's no sense of grandeur.
Yeah,
I mean, think
yeah.
about like a great example of grandeur, of course, is the classic Leni Riefenstahl film, The Triumph of the Will, showing the party rally in Nuremberg in 1936, I think it is. And of course, there's a bunch of other films that she did as a propagandist for the Third Reich. But that's grandeur, the Cathedral of Light. All the troops, all the stormtroopers marching perfectly in cadence, side by side, looking identical, all completely their individuality completely sublimated toward the form. I mean, it's kind of like those North Korean rallies where they all have the colored cards that they put up in synchronization to form broader images of Kim Jong-un or whatever. It's that kind of thing. Trump's rallies they have kind of like a putsy, schlubby grandeur.
Oh yeah,
because
like him. Yeah, it is American. You're right. There's
look at our military uniforms. They're schlumpy, ill-fitted, loose, compared to like an SS outfit. Those were sharp. Or Mussolini's uniforms, which were designed famously by Hugo Boss. All right, so let's keep going. Number 6. The authority of natural leaders, always inevitably male, throughout society, culminating in a national chieftain who alone is capable of incarnating the group's destiny.
Yes, well, again, yes.
We have that one.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's impossible to imagine MAGAism, the torch ever being handed to like a Kimberly Guilfoyle or any other woman.
No, I would agree.
Okay. And then last but not least, the beauty of violence and of will when they are devoted to the group's success in a Darwinian struggle.
Well, Trump has alluded to that several times in his speech. He uses violent language, and will, of course, is hearkening to Hitler, which was will was all on his ascent. Will, I don't think that word specifically applies, only because we don't use it in this country. But it's definitely what's at play here.
Yeah, I think the will thing is a subtext of MAGAism and Trumpism. It's sort of like we don't need to articulate specific policies. Look at the 2020 Republican platform. They literally decided not to issue one in 2020.
Yeah, whatever Trump says is Jake with us.
That's right. So that is like, in other words, like only I can fix it. I'll get in there. So like when his interviewers try to pin him down, like, oh, you say you'll end the Russia-Ukraine war. How will you do that? It's like, well, if I tell you that, then I wouldn't be able to make the deal, he says. In other words, I'm not going to tell you. The truth is, I don't really believe he has a plan. Just like he didn't really plan to build the wall, much less have Mexico pay for it. I don't. Healthcare, still waiting. Waiting.
He has a what was that? A concept of a plan.
Right. Healthcare is super interesting, right? He obviously is kind of lazy. That was his reputation in college, right? Was that he was very smart, but he didn't do the work. And I kind of think, like, I could really imagine, like, come on, he's the president of the United States. In 2017, when he got in there, he could have just like called in his HHS director. Oh, it was like Carson, right? Ben Carson, and be like, hey, Sleepy,
hey, Sleepy,
go out there and listen. The Democrats are burning our asses on healthcare. Can you get out there and like come up with some kind of GOP version of Obamacare that we can repeal and replace it with? He never signed that, right? Like they never came up with anything. He just doesn't care.
That's always been the advantage of Trump in terms of those of us who believe in freedom and do fear fascism, or at least totalitarianism, and that is that he's lazy. He's never been one to work particularly hard or create, like you said, a platform or a policy that has to go forward. But Ted, I got to ask you, you got an A on your paper, this definitions. So I guess the question, which I'm going to give you much more authority than myself, I think you can tell by what I'm speaking, how I feel. Your sense, is Trumpism fascism?
I think it has fascist tendencies, and I think it's a fascist light, a fascism light. I don't think it's true fascism in the mid 20th century meaning of the term. I think where it really falls apart is in that first thing. And well, we talked twice. There's two basically about like it's an ideology that requires the sublimation of the individual. And there's something that's left out of here, and I know Paxton would agree with me on this. I hope he listens to us. I wouldn't be surprised if he does. Hey, and if Professor, I hope you're listening. The cult of militarism and expansion, and also of the scapegoat, are really important aspects of fascism. So and by militarism, the country has to constantly be at war with some kind of external threat. It's not enough to just have like scapegoating of like, we do have to have scapegoating. I mean, Trump has that. He started in 2016 with scapegoating migrants. That's a classic for him. It's not going away. It's only got, because of increased immigration, that's only become a better issue for him in this cycle. But this is where it falls apart. He's not a militarist. He's not into war. I mean, when he was president, he talked to North Korea and ratcheted down tensions. He could have started a war against North Korea. North Korea is definitely a bête noire for Americans. He absolutely, negotiated with the Taliban and brought an end and negotiated an end to the U.S. occupation of Afghanistan after 20 years that Biden followed up upon. So, this is not a guy who, for all of his myriad of faults, he's not a warmonger. And you kind of have to be a warmonger. Although, because even Mussolini, we kind of forget, like, well, Italy didn't really, they weren't very invading. They still invaded Ethiopia.
Yeah, I was going to say, they still, Northern Africa, they still showed up.
They showed up and apparently did a shitty job, as always.
Yeah, again,
blue.
But the wine quality went up 1,000% in Ethiopia.
Sure,
let's be clear.
I'm sure that's true. So so I guess my point is that I think, but where it really falls apart is the militarism thing,
right?
And I think also the cult of the
group
over the individual. That's where I don't even know if you now that's said, right? Is it okay to, is there a future for a sort of hybrid movement? I think about like under traditional Marxism and we're going to hear, Manila and I are planning, we'll probably do a show about like, what is Marxism at some point. But in traditional Marxism, you have to go through the first stage of capitalism before you can start transitioning to socialism and then ultimately move toward communism. But Mao Zedong disagreed, and he was like, "Well, we didn't have that capitalist thing in peasant China, rural China. So we're just going to jump straight into socialism, right?" He certainly made a case for it for the better part of 20, 30 years. So similarly, can you have a fascism that is an evolution, or let's just say a spin-off, an alternate version that from the classic 20th century version that doesn't require can it still be fascism if it doesn't require the sublimation of the individual?
Well, that's one of, here's the thing. If it ticks off, say, 7 or 8 of the 10, then I think it is what it is. If you say, this animal has this quality, this quality, this quality, doesn't have this quality, but if it has, 8 of the 10 qualities, then it probably is what you think it is. This has the same thing. Absolute dedication to a single individual, which runs very contrary to American democracy, of course. But like you said, the primacy of the group, and doesn't do it. Group victimhood, absolutely. Dread of the
group's decadence.
Yes, that's half, right? We figured that was a half a point.
Like elitist liberalism.
Closer integration.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely Trump definitely proposes that enhanced sense of belonging. That's absolutely with the caps and the flags and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Authority of the authority, absolutely, and the beauty of violence and of the will. both. I'm not the
The
will.
beauty of violence. I think Trump is obsessed with the
Oh
beauty
yeah,
of violence.
yeah, absolutely.
When he calls for beating them up, like, hey, cops, like, when you arrest them, don't be careful with their head, bang their head against the top of the police cruiser before you put them in there. It's funny because you get the strong sense that this is a guy who's never seen a punch used in anger, right? I mean, this is not a strong butch guy. He's Mr. Softy. He's the Pillsbury Dough guy.
I'm going to jump in and say there was a story reported by the Daily News. I think it was the News, not the Post. Many, many, many years ago, before, when Donald Trump was just some rich guy in Manhattan, he saw somebody getting mugged. He told his driver to stop, and he jumped out of the car and ran towards the muggers, who I suspect their first thought was, well, oh wait, isn't that Donald Trump? And then ran away before he had a chance. So I don't think he's physically. Okay. I don't think he's a coward that way. I really do think that he, he has that element of it. But he's also always had bodyguards. He's always had someone to defend him and protect him from any kind of real physical threat. So, I don't know. I think his response to the shooting in Pennsylvania was, showed again. I don't know.
You brought that up, Scott. I wanted to ask you, and that goes right into my last question before we wrap up. I want to. What do you think? I mean, do you think that Democrats who, like Harris, who call Trump fascist, not like a guy who has fascist tendencies, but just a fascist, do you think they are, doing the right thing and warning the American people of this imminent danger that we have to vote against no matter what? Or do you think she's, adding fuel to the fire and inspiring the assassination attempts against Trump and maybe left-wing violence against the right?
No. I mean, just short answer, no. I think that the rhetoric overall has gotten to be so base that that's what's led to that. And you get, it's the act of madmen, the schlub up in Pennsylvania. I mean, this guy, come on, you read his bio and it's just pathetic. That's pretty on point with most assassins. Mm-hmm. And so is this projected? No, I think the Republicans to their, are trying to, and I don't blame them, are trying to say that, yes, this is because of the rhetoric from the left, from the Democrats calling us fascists. But no, I don't attribute that because there's no evidence of the two guys who did it. The third guy is hilarious because he's a total Trumpy. He shows up with guns in his trunk, which apparently is de rigueur. That's what you're supposed to do if you're a Trumpy, is have guns in your trunk. He left them in his trunk. He was walking in. They ask you, do you have guns near here? He says, yeah, I can have them in my car. And the sheriff of that county just goes batshit crazy, arrests him, stands in front of the press, says, I have stopped an assassination attempt. You did nothing of the kind, and he's being sued now by the guy, and should be, and I hope he's voted out of office. It was so preposterous. But to your point, no, I do not believe that is a direct
so you think it's a legitimate dialogue? There are people who think it really crosses on the right, who really feel like it crosses a line that, at that rate, certainly Trump calling Kamala Harris a socialist or a communist obviously crosses the line because it's obviously nothing close to true.
No, and we just went through the list of an academic's definition of what a fascist is, and we clicked off 7.5 of 10 boxes. I mean, that's 8 rather. I'm sorry. That's significant. That's significant. So yeah, I think it's calling if the swastika fits,
if the jackboot fits, wear it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right then. All right, we're gonna leave that there. Scott Stantis, thank you so much for joining us here. Scott Stantis is co-hosting as a guest. He is the cartoonist for the Chicago Tribune, creator of the comic strip Prickly City, contributor to Center Clip, winner of the Sigma Delta Chi Journalism Award, and the co-host of the DMZ America podcast with me, Ted Rall. Scott and I are going to have a new DMZ America podcast coming out later today. It might be until tomorrow when we get it all produced and sent out.
With a special guest.
We have a special guest, Michael Deatter, cartoonist for numerous newspapers, formerly of the Washington Post, will be joining us to talk about the state of the campaign as seen from the Great White North. Manila Chan, hopefully, will be back healthy and strong tomorrow morning, and we'll see you guys all then. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit that subscribe button on Rumble. Make sure you hit the sub button. If you can become a paid subscriber, just $5 a month. That's something you can only do when we're live. So do it now if you're thinking of doing it, so we can keep doing this show for you. If you're enjoying what you see and you find value in what we're doing, please help us continue to do it. We are 1,000% fully independent and rely on subscribers to help us not starve to death and become homeless and become fascists and I don't know, bad things. So click on that button right now and below the Rumble chat. And of course, please also subscribe on YouTube. See you later. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Ted.
Thanks, Scott. See you tomorrow, Manila.
Get well, Manila.